Hello and welcome everyone. Today we are going to have a session that calls the true cost of a US bachelor's degree. My name is Yana Ovcharenko and I am an outreach coordinator here at EducationUSA Ukraine. And let me just kindly remind you that EducationUSA is your official source on US higher education. So, as I have mentioned, we are going to talk about the true cost of getting bachelor's degree in the USA. And it's extremely important to know this part only when you start thinking about studying in the US, when you only start thinking about your academic journey there. Yeah, you have to take into the consideration that part, financial part. Believe me, it's very important. And if you know about it now, it can prevent a lot of stress in the future. And today we have amazing guest speaker with us, Dr. Tim. I believe that you may have already known him and seen him on our lectures. And today Dr. Tim is going to share all details, all secrets about the true cost of US bachelor's degree. Dr. Tim, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that excellent introduction, Yana. I really appreciate it. This, to me, is one of the most important topics to think about when you're thinking about studying abroad. These concepts can apply to any country studying abroad. And so we talk about it specifically with USA, but it could be for any country. And it's an emerging issue when it comes to visa issuance. And it used to be a small speed bump for students to overcome to get a visa. It is now a razor wire fence. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. All of the areas that we're going to talk about are here. If there's a category I haven't thought of, I'd like to know. And so, contact me or Yana, and ask about that. Somebody said books, for example, because it's not listed, but that's included in fees. And so we want to cover like all the aspects of this costs, which includes the possibility of things like scholarships and jobs and funding it yourself and things like that. So one of the things to keep in mind is there's different tricks that schools use to demonstrate lower and lower numbers to try to make it easier and easier for people to apply to their school. We're going to bypass all of that because those tricks are not useful to the student. They might be useful they might appear to be useful to the university because they get more applicants the lower the dollar amount is, but that doesn't help with visa. That just makes it worse. And we're going to talk about jobs because a lot of people fail the interview because they say, well, they're going to get a job to pay for school. And that, frankly, is not possible. Jobs in the USA pay enough basically for pizza money, and that's about it. Okay. So let's start with the big one. This is the one that I hear most from students at EducationUSA is about scholarships. So let's put it in perspective for a moment. There are over 1 million now, students from around the world studying in the United States. 1 million. There are dozens of scholarships. And if you remove the scholarships for religion institutions like monasteries and things like that, where students basically work for free and theoretically study, you take that out, there's less than 100 scholarships that are meaningful dollar amounts for students in the United States every year. And when I say meaningful, I mean pays for 100% of tuition or pays for 100% of housing or something or both for duration of study, because there are always little scholarships. I have a little scholarship specifically designed to introduce you to a business member in the community, and hopefully you form a relationship and a bond, and it helps you get a job later, et cetera, et cetera. But it's $1,000. That's nothing. A meaningful scholarship starts at $20,000 a year for 4 years. Those are very, very, very rare. And even at $20,000, that's not a full ride scholarship. So scholarships are usually small amounts. They're usually predicated on something which is like only first year, and they're really unlikely. Don't count on a scholarship, and never mention scholarship as your funding source at a visa interview unless you have that full ride scholarship in writing with you at that meeting. Because the first thing they will cancel your visa or not allow a visa is if they think that you think you're going to get a scholarship to pay for this academic journey. When you go to that visa approval, they're going to look at two things. They're going to look at the number that is in the database that the university puts in, which is the number you gave the university. It might be real, it might be fake. More and more often, they're fake, and there's actually ways to kind of try to verify and stuff, but generally, they're going to look at that number that is placed into the database at the moment of your interview. But they're also going to research your family in advance and find out how many finances you have. And they're also going to consider what is the rate of fraudulent documents at that embassy that come in. And so you'll need to, of course, demonstrate that minimum number that is required, which is 1 year of all expenses. For my school, for example, that's $32,000. Different schools are more or less. Again, probably doesn't matter, because do you really have what it takes for all 4 years of a bachelor's degree, including working a job on campus, including maybe doing OPT after year 2, including, living very frugally, including maybe a tiny scholarship, all of these things? Do you have enough? And more often, visa officers are making that determination. And so if you show me a little number, 32,000, that's not anywhere near the number you need. So if you have more, show more. We see a tactic that families use to kind of move the money around, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next couple of slides. Housing. There's lots of different kinds of housing. Lots of places have dorms, but usually dorms are at schools that are in the middle of nowhere, which is perfectly fine. Schools that are in urban environments or suburban environments typically don't have housing. Many schools say they have housing, but you can't get in because it's all full of local resident students, and international students are last on the list. Also, keep in mind that if you're in a dorm, the tendency is 90% of dorm students after the freshman year leave the dorms because they're horrible, and they get an apartment with a bunch of friends. But housing is really important. Housing is expensive, no matter where you go. Sometimes you can say the food is included, sometimes it isn't, but housing is important. Homestay is typically the least expensive option of all options, because it means you don't have to buy furniture, you don't have to hook up the internet, you don't have to call for electricity. You have a kitchen with pots and pans and silverware. You don't have to go buy all of those things. So another thing to consider is transportation. What is your method of driving around going to be? If you are in a place that is a long ways from everything, then that's fine, because you'll probably get around on a bike everywhere or even walk. If you're in a suburban area, you're probably going to need to bike or bus. Uber is becoming extremely expensive, so Uber is not a great choice, but it can work like the first month. And then after that, you need to figure another option out. A lot of schools will give you a bus pass so that you can ride the buses for free. And the buses are safe in many suburban areas, and they work pretty good. And you're going to spend your time on the bus, maybe a longer time than you'd like, but you can always just, use your iPad to read your textbooks while you're on the bus. So you can make good use of the time. Weekends are important because one of the big parts of university life is social, and weekends are expensive, and local kids have plenty of money. And so you want to go clubbing, you're looking at $150. And if you're on a tight budget, that $150, you're now taking money away from tuition for next year. And it's really important that you realize how expensive it is and how fast you can burn through your money. You really can't earn enough money on an on-campus job to go clubbing. Clubbing's very expensive. And I know that people think that university is like what they see in the movies. And that's actually not as true as you think. There are plenty of four-year schools that do have an active, say, Greek life, but there's a lot like my school that don't, because it's not useful academically. It's a social thing. Another thing to consider in the things to consider is what is the tuition and fees? Because sometimes you don't really know until you get there. And a lot of times for the I-20, it's ridiculously understated, especially on the housing portion. So for example, a lot of schools will say, okay, the minimum course load is 12 credits. So we're going to say this much for tuition for 12 credits. And then there once was an apartment for $1,000 a month. So we're going to use that for housing. And you get there and you find out, well, if I do 12 credits, that's not a full load in order to become a sophomore in 1 year. I have to take more than that. I need 30 credits total, not 24. And that $1,000 apartment has had somebody in it for 10 years and no one, the next lowest one is $500 a month more. So be really careful when you look at the I-20 number. Remember that the I-20 number is not likely to be a real number. It's very much understated. Your costs will be up to 50% higher than that I-20 number. 2+2 transfer is interesting because a lot of people talk about, well, I'm going to go to a community college first, save a ton of money, and then I'm going to transfer to another school and have to pay the extra. And I'm here to say, as a community college, it's not a ton of money. Yes, it's less expensive because we're highly subsidized by the government, and community colleges typically don't have big expenses around research because we're not research institutions. You don't have to pay for any of that. So the tuition is much less. But is it enough less to make it so somebody who can barely make this work, make it work? It's really not. You're really talking about, $20,000 at the most over the course of 4 years. And so don't use 2+2 transfer and community college as your mechanism to make this all affordable. Use 2+2 transfer as a mechanism to get great academic support for your first 2 years to guarantee that you're going to have a highly successful second 2 years, which are the most important years and are the most linked to great job outcomes. So you're going to want to use community college to maximize academic opportunity. Okay, I'm going to talk again, because I know I've mentioned it. I should have mentioned it by now if my script is right 3 times. This is number 4. Do not think that the I-20 is the number that works. What happens, we see a lot, is if mom and dad have 500,000 US in the bank, and they don't want you to know as a student because you've been begging for a car or better clothes or a trip or something, and they say, oh, we can't afford it, and then when it comes time for you to go to college, you find out they have $500,000, and you're like, what? Same thing with agents. Agents are saying, we need money for this, we need this fee and that fee and the other fee, and mom and dad are saying, oh, we don't have that much money, and then when it comes time to show how much money, they show 500,000. They go, what? You've been, beating me up on $1,000 in fees to get your student in the United States, and you have $500,000? So what happens is mom and dad, in order to hide that, they take the $500,000 out and they put it in an account for one day for $32,000 for College of Canyons or whatever the number is for the school that you're applying to. Just for a day, they get the statement, then they put it back, and now they show that statement. And of course, the statement shows $32,000. Well, the visa officer is going to go, that's not enough. No visa. So it's going to be really, really tough, but you got to show all the money. You got to show all of your economic capability when it comes to asking for that I-20, even if the school only asks for a little bit of money because they're competing for your application. When you get there, you'll find out, oh man, it's $10,000 a year more to live here and study here than I thought. That's the I-20 number. Ignore it. Find a way to show $100,000 or something like that for your I-20. It's really an important part of managing the visa. Okay. Next, bottom line. We're going to go into the details now. I'm going to show you the spreadsheets and everything. And we're going to go fast through it because it's boring. But it's going to be here and it's recorded so you can look at it. But bottom line, it's $150,000 to get a bachelor's degree in the USA. If you have no possibility of $150,000 over the next 4 years, it's not going to work. And this 150, yeah, there's a spread, like maybe you take a whole bunch of extra classes every semester and maybe you get a great job on campus that pays more than usual. And we're going to go through that spreadsheet. So maybe you can afford more. Maybe you get a scholarship. But $150,000 is pretty much average. Now, if you go to a prestigious school like Berkeley, you could, or UCLA, double it right there, 300,000. This number is like really a realistic number with a little bit of bias of living in California, which is more expensive than, say, Mississippi or Alabama, but you have to live in Mississippi or Alabama, which a lot of people don't want to do. So you have to kind of decide. But that bottom line number is $150,000. And one of the reasons why Yana asked me to do this is because if you are hoping to get a full ride scholarship and you're a brilliant student, that doesn't mean you're going to get one. You need a plan B and you need to focus on that. Don't let too much time go by before you jump into plan B. Because plan A, yes, come to the United States on a full scholarship, but like I said, it's really hard to make that happen. All right. All right, deep dive into scholarships real fast. Scholarships are for scholarly pursuits. People think they get a scholarship as a freshman, but you're not going to do any research your first 2 years. The research doesn't start at the earliest until your junior year. Now, you might be a research assistant, washing test tubes or writing down numbers or reading articles and summarizing them. But scholarship is specifically designed to add to the scholarly benefit of the host institution. So community colleges, for instance, don't have scholarships because there is none of that. We don't do that kind of stuff, but our prices are lower because it's heavily subsidized by the government for a lot of reasons that don't matter here, but you get to have the benefit of it. Really what you're asking for is a grant. So if you start thinking about it as a grant, you're asking for people to donate money to you. It's like an online donation scheme. You're hoping the college will donate money to you and to get you to go to their school. And hopefully it's enough if they're gonna, but really it's specific to scholarship. The alternative to that is a special talent. Like let's say you play the clarinet and you're really good. Well, they might want you on the orchestra and they'll give you a scholarship to play in their orchestra. Or what if you're a great athlete and you really believe you are fantastic and they want you on the team? Well, you can get a scholarship for that. Merits are grade-based. Merit scholarships are hard because your grades are in a foreign institution someplace. Unless it's a US accredited high school, the grades don't mean very much. And then, of course, you may have a special relationship. You may say, go to a Christian college in Oklahoma because you're part of a church and people know that church and they know you, and the people in the church donate money to get it so you can go to school at their university. So there are scholarships, but now you know where they come. Yes, there's a bunch of institutional scholarships, and EducationUSA is absolutely the best source of information on the planet when it comes to institutional scholarships and awards and organizations and people who donate. And you should definitely pursue scholarships through them. They're the ones who know everything about it. I'm just saying there's a million students studying in the United States from all around the world, and there's 100 scholarships. So don't use it as something you're going to count on. All right, let's talk about, we already kind of talked about that, more on scholarships. Be careful of false substitution in scholarships. So what'll happen is they'll say, okay, we're going to give you a $20,000 scholarship, and the tuition is $50,000 a year, so that's $30,000 a year. That sounds really good, but you could have gone to a community college for half that. Same classes, same books, same everything, great access, better access actually to high level institutions. And but you felt good because you got that scholarship. So be really, really careful about that. And look at the net number. What is the actual net number? Where else is the expenses that you're not really seeing? So be careful of that. Also, the first year one is really bad because what are you going to do year 2, 3, and 4? All of a sudden, you got to pay full ride scholarship. I cannot tell you how many students this happens to all the time, and they end up having to go home before they finish their bachelor's degree. All right, so I'm going to put scholarships down on our spreadsheet as $0. I know some people will get it, but I don't know how to quantify that, and most students are not. So for scholarships, there it is on our first view of the spreadsheet. It's $0. We have your monthlies, year 1, year 2, year 3, 4. We got these items on the sides here, and this is how we're going to keep track of what we're talking about as far as true cost. Visa approvals are, we've talked about this. Be really careful when you show up without enough money because the visa officer thinks you're going to work illegally. That's the first conclusion they'll come to. All right, housing. We talked a little bit about that. There's lots of different kinds. So an apartment rental requires you to present yourself in person to the apartment manager and to have a economic background, a credit score, a previous place you rented, things like that. It needs to be US based. So it's really hard to rent an apartment from outside of the country. Some students can do it, but what they do is they have to pay, say, 6 months rent up front. And that's really expensive. But you have to pay it anyway. And if you have enough money for all 4 years, then it doesn't really matter if you have to pay it up front because it's paid is paid. Apartment share is a little bit better because what that means is you hop into an apartment that has other students in it. Maybe that one student left and went to Stanford or Berkeley or whatever school they went to, and now you can go into their bed and you can just pop right in. But that takes knowledge. You got to know people. That usually works really well if you're an athlete, for example, because the whole baseball team will have 6 baseball guys in an apartment. One guy will move up, and then there'll be an empty spot, and you can slide into that spot. How you find out about that is usually through the network that you already have. The schools typically don't have that kind of network. Dorms are dorms. Everybody goes to the dorms for 1 year. There's a big difference between freshman dorms and what's called upper division dorms. Upper division dorms are junior and senior year and master's degrees. Those are places where people in dorms, for the purpose of going to school, they study. They're cleaner, they're quieter, there's a lot less parties and booze and crazy. So the upper division dorms are great, and it's a great place for an international student to go, and getting in is a lot easier than the freshman dorm. The freshman dorms are a mess. So be careful about dorms. Take them if you can, because it's a really good way to get in. And like I said, most dorms at schools are in really remote areas where, frankly, you don't have a choice. And so they're a little bit more expensive because there's no apartments and there's no homes, and you're kind of out in the middle of anywhere. Homestay is a great choice if you know the homestay company is legit. I can't tell you how many times I've had people sign up for a homestay, show up with their suitcases, and they ring the doorbell and nobody's home. And there's nobody there. They don't know who you are. You can't stay there. And so I end up putting them on my couch for a couple of weeks until they figure out what to do. And I'm tired of that. So for instance, here at my school, I started a homestay company. It is not part of the college. We spun it off for legal reasons, but it's managed and only does homestay for College of the Canyons. And I know every parent. I know what room you're going to be in. It's all set up as a student. Everything is taken care of for you. Is it expensive? It seems like it is. It seems like it's more expensive than sharing an apartment, but you don't have to buy a bed. You don't have to buy internet. You don't have to pay for utilities. It's just one flat fee you just pay every month. House rental is kind of the same as apartment rental. Kind of depends on the environment of where you are. A house is a big place. You can have 15 students in a house if the neighborhood doesn't lose their mind. And if you're quiet and courteous and nobody even barely knows you're there. Legally, you can't do that. Legally, you can't have more than like 2 people per bedroom. But we've seen lots. And if you're really good people, you're really quiet, you're really careful, and you don't bother your neighbors, then you can get away with it. House rental, again, you either slide in because it's a house share, or you're already here and you rent the house. We do have companies that rent houses, agents, for example, and they have all their students stay in those houses. All right, some more about housing. Do not forget, you've got these expenses associated with housing that are pretty big. If you don't use homestay, you have to call the internet company. You have to put a down payment in. You have to put a deposit in. You have to prove that you're not going to just not pay your bill. Same with utilities. Furniture can be rented. It's rather expensive. You can go to IKEA and buy the cheapest stuff around, or you can find used stuff on the streets. I've seen it all. But you have to pay for that. Do not forget that if you rent an apartment by yourself or rent a house, you got to fully put everything in your kitchen. You got to buy a microwave oven. You got to buy silverware, pots and pans. You got to do all that. It's not really that much money. I mean, you're looking at only $1,000, but you're only going to have it for 2 years, and then you're going to leave it behind because the next place you go is probably going to be a dorm. And then keep in mind, if you have any other subscriptions like Netflix or any of that stuff, you got to pay for all of that if you go on your own. Homestay families, usually they include all of that. All right, housing. I'm going to put it in at $1,000 a month. That's just average. I think that is actually a little bit low. You know, I really struggled with what number to put here. Homestay, for example, is can be $1,500 pretty easily, but that includes meals. And so if you take the food out and if you take the setup costs, like buying a bed out, and you can just slide into whatever's already there, you might be able to do $1,000 per month on average. And I'm looking at the full spectrum of everyone in the United States, not just in my neighborhood. In my neighborhood, $1,000 is not going to be enough. $1,200 is going to be the start. But I live in a really super nice, really clean, really safe, high-end neighborhood. You don't have to live that way. Now, you don't want to live like in Berkeley. Berkeley's dangerous and much more expensive than I am. So you got to be careful about that. And that's one of the reasons why 2 + 2 works, is because you're a little older when you transfer to Berkeley. Be careful not to follow the housing number that's on the I-20. Remember that. I think I already mentioned that already. All right. $1,000 a month, there's the number, 1,000, and you got your first year, second year, third year. I'm assuming that you're going to have the same amount all the way through. This is going to be minimum 1,000, and that's 48. So we're at $48,000 for housing over 4 years. All right, next we're going to talk about food. Food is a big deal. Food is what you go to when you're happy. Food is what you go to when maybe you're a little bit sad. Food is what you go to socialize or to meet people or have dinner together. One of the toughest parts about food is in most communities, not everything, in some urban communities, this is not true, but in suburban communities and in rural communities, you're probably unlikely to find food that you're familiar with. There's no good Ukrainian food in Santa Clarita. There's plenty of other stuff, but you're not going to find good Ukrainian food. You're going to have to go 40-mile drive to a place to find good Ukrainian food. So be really careful about nutrition because you cannot eat at McDonald's every day. I've had conversations with students that are depressed. What'd you eat for breakfast this morning? Did you eat? Yes. What'd you have? Well, I had McDonald's. Well, what'd you have for dinner last night? Well, I had McDonald's. It turns out there's a McDonald's right around the corner from the host family, and they don't like the food the host family makes because it's American style. So they come and they eat at McDonald's all the time, and they wonder why they don't feel good and they're depressed. It doesn't, they don't like it. And so, you got to be careful with food. And that's one of the reasons the host family is good, is because a lot of times host families, they'll want to encourage you to help them cook food that you like. What are your flavors? What are your spices? Let's go downtown and get those things. There are cafeteria plans at dorms. Those are good. But a lot of food that you buy just spoils in the refrigerator. You just don't eat all the salad in the bag kind of thing. So I take all of that in consideration when I figure out how much this food is going to be. And I figure a minimum 2,000 calories a day. Now, if you're an athlete playing football, it's going to be 6,000 calories a day. So your food budget's going to be significantly higher. So the number I'm going to pick here is really more along the lines of what's the most likely food amount. So let's break it down to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so this is kind of how I did it. I took a foot-long Subway, it's generally much more nutritious than most places. And I figured maybe you're going to get some free food from on campus from events like I hold, pizza parties, and other places have, hamburgers, and they give them away. And so you're going to get some food. It's hard to plan, but you're going to get some food that way. And basically, this is what it boils down to. So I came up with this amount, and this is where I put it on $1,000 a month, which is going to end up on your spreadsheet at about the same as housing. So notice that housing and food are about the same, even though there's a lot of variability there. There's a lot of choices you can make. You can eat, top ramen, 100% carbs, no nutritional value basically, but it fills you up. And there's been students who have survived off of, a loaf of bread and a cup of coffee. So, it all depends on whether you're going to sit in a library and not burn very many calories, or whether you're an active person. So here's our numbers. So here's how we're getting to everything. Next thing we're going to talk about here is the weekend, because you are going to make friends. You need to be very clear to those friends that you do not have a lot of money unless you do. And make sure that the choices that are made about what you go and do are directly related to the fact that, you are on a budget, and make sure you stay within that budget. A movie alone with popcorn is $25 now. I mean, you could do dinner and a movie when I was a student's age, years and years and years and years and years ago, for $20. So even just one person is more. And I've already talked about clubbing. And right now, in the cycle of economics, restaurants have become very expensive in the United States. They used to be 10 years ago, it was really a toss-up. Do I eat at a restaurant or do I cook my own food? Because it was almost equal, but that has completely changed. It is half as expensive or less for me to cook at home now than to eat at a restaurant. So I've changed my lifestyle, and I eat at home a whole lot more. That's changed. That's new. So keep that in mind when you're working out, your budget. Holidays is another big thing. Do you go home? Airfare has gone through the roof. It's now very expensive to fly to Europe. It used to be I could fly to Europe for $999. Now I fly to Europe for $1,000 more than that. So how manage your family visits? Do you really have to go home every holiday? We now have Zoom. You can see people. What kind of budget are you on? What kind of sacrifices are you going to make? I've had students come to me asking for scholarship money to pay for the tuition, as they just got back from a trip home that cost $5,000. And I can't give them the scholarship because they just spent $5,000 going home, which I know is important for emotional and mental health. You miss your family, you miss your friends, but you have to have a realistic idea of what it really costs to go to school. And just because you went home doesn't mean you get a scholarship. So tuition is something we're gonna go back to the spreadsheets here in a minute, but tuition is something to take care of. There's all these different ways to go to school. There's 1+3. So that means you do basically almost your freshman year, or maybe your whole freshman year, and then you go and you do that from home. So your costs are only tuition. You have to do it online. It's a little lonely, but for some people, introverted people, it works great. And then they go straight to the four-year school and they enter as a sophomore, for example, or even if you enter as a freshman, you only have a few more classes. And you can start doing that in high school. Not every university lets you do that. Mine does. You have to find out if the university will let you do it. But that's a way to save money because there's no living expenses. You're only paying tuition. There's a 1+1+2. That's where you go 1 year from home. Sometimes it's at your high school. It's part of your high school sometimes. Then 1 year at the junior college or community college, like what I am. And then you transfer and do 2 more years. Then there's the 2+2 and 0+4. And these numbers of tuition of 15, 15, 25, 25, that is as low as it gets. You're outside of the bell curve if you go lower than that. There are some that are lower, but this is a good, honest number for how much tuition is going to actually end up costing. All right, so if you get a job, let's say you have a job for 20 hours a week, and let's say you are fully employed 48 weeks a year. So there's going to be some time when the school's closed. You're going to make $14,000 a year. And then they're going to hold taxes back on you. So you don't get the full amount in your paycheck. So let's say it's $11,000 per year. Now you can apply for that money to get back to you by filling out taxes, but most students don't do it. I hold tax seminars every year, and attendance is maybe 10% of the students that work attend. The rest of it, just let the government keep the money. Okay, so here is our number. So what I did is, you can see here, we had housing and food and scholarship, and I kind of taught you how we're using the spreadsheet that way. And now we're using tuition, 15, 15, 25, 25 for $80,000 for all 4 years. I took a minus number off, saying, let's say you earned $11,000 a year, which is pretty much the most you can possibly earn at a job for all 4 years. And I gave you some money for weekends and holidays every month. You can blow $3,000 on going to movies, and if you save up, maybe for airfare. It kind of depends on how you spend it, but I only gave you $12,000, and that's where you end up for $144,000 in order to go to school in the United States. The reason 150 is the number I pick is because some of these numbers aren't really that reliable. Housing can definitely be a lot more. Weekends and holidays always is more. Nobody sticks to their budget, and jobs usually don't pan out as good as I'm showing you. So with that in mind, basically this is it. We're right back to that same slide. You need to know that you have access to at least $150,000 if you start school in the fall of 2025. What happens in the fall of 2026? Who knows? Could be higher, could be a little lower. We'll have to do an analysis. If you're a high school student right now and you're 3 years away from going to school, plan on 150 as a solid number. Do not plan on 100,000. And so this is it. This is the number. I'm happy to answer questions. You can send emails. Yana is the expert. EducationUSA is an expert about this. I'm not saying don't try if 150,000 is impossible. You might get a visa, and you might be able to get into a school, and you might be able to get a bigger scholarship, especially the second 2 years. The first 2 years, no, really rare. Second 2 years, you might get a scholarship. And if you're in a master's degree program, you're likely to get a scholarship if you're an outstanding student. So you have to understand the different levels of university and where you are in your path and what the likelihood of a scholarship is. But plan on this $150,000. If you have no way of doing that, find plan B. Talk to EducationUSA about some other way to accomplish this. Look at other schools, other countries. Get a bachelor's degree in your own school, and then transfer over for a master's degree and do a master's degree in the United States. It costs less than $150,000 for a master's degree, and the job potential is excellent for OPT after a master's degree. So with that, I'm going to end this thing, in this slide and slideshow, and I guess I'm going to press presentations. Now that's for uploading. I'll let you, what should I press, Yana?
I can do this, I believe. Yeah.
Remove the source. Voila.
Yep.
I like this format, but I've never used it before, but it's very intuitive.
Yeah, by the way, it was created by Ukrainians. So yeah, it's kind of like the initiative we made. So yeah, it's really nice.
It's really good.
Yep. So guys, I encourage you to leave your questions in the chat if you have them. And now I would like to take a moment to thank you, Dr. Tim, for very practical tips. Yeah, and I think that it's really great advice to be realistic, yeah, and to plan ahead accordingly to all info you can find on the university's website. Yeah, you can search how much is going to cost to attend certain college and plan accordingly and be realistic. And of course, EducationUSA is always happy to help you. Yeah, so just reach out to us and we can create a plan how you can finance for your education. So yeah, that's it. Let me check the chat. I believe that for now there are no questions, but let me remind you guys that this session is going to be recorded. It's actually recorded now, so you will have a chance to look through it a little later. Yeah, and if you happen to have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us, and we would be happy to assist you. Okay, I believe that's it. Thank you again, Dr. Tim. We were really happy to have you as a speaker. Thank you for your approach and for your tips. They are really valuable, and I'm totally sure that they are going to help a lot of students. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Yana. Have a great rest of your evening.
Yeah, same to you, and see you guys